Matt, it was 1 week ago that we set up the Arizona State matchup, discussed that as kind of a resting spot. Okay, let's get through it, play some players, no injuries. We don't have to hang 60 on anyone, but let's, work on some coming off a rather rough offensive effort in Corvallis. Let's work on some things. And of course, continue to progress on the defensive side of the ball. So your thoughts about the effort in the desert?
Yeah, I think the USC has to be really pleased about this game, not in the sense that it was, a tremendous performance. It was not. It was a pretty ordinary performance, but like that's what this game was meant for. Like you're playing Arizona State, you don't have to bring your A game. This was exactly the kind of game USC needed, where it just kind of put it on cruise control. We were expecting a bit of an emotional letdown from the draining Oregon State game. So the team was flat in the first half. And the real question was at halftime, up by only 4 points. All right, so now you need to put these guys away in the second half. You need to show championship attitude. You need to show championship physicality. Can you really focus in for like a good concentrated 15 to 20 minutes and swat these Sun Devils away? It's exactly what happened. USC was much more physical, much more aggressive and authoritative. So like, you weren't expecting 60 all-out minutes of complete football, not after the Oregon State game. And let's note, Justin Dedich, the interior offensive lineman, he did not play. He had the heavy brace against Oregon State. He soldiered through that game, but he did not play against Arizona State. That's great. You get the win with Dedich being able to rest up for this Washington State-Utah double stack. Cortland Ford briefly played. Early in the game, he committed a holding penalty to wipe out what was a long ball touchdown from Caleb Williams to Mario Williams. He sat after that holding penalty and stayed on the bench for the rest of the game. Good. You're saving him up. You're making sure that if he plays, he can play well. He can be effective. You don't want him out there if he's not effective. So this Arizona State game, yeah, as you said, it was the resting spot on the schedule, really came at a good time. And so USC didn't overextend players who need to be saved up for the Washington State-Utah double stack. And let's credit Bobby Haskins for holding down the fort at left tackle. Where would this team be without Bobby Haskins as the backup to Cortland Ford? He's been able to eat up snaps against Oregon State and against Arizona State so that Cortland Ford can get healthy while Dedich is on the mend. So the offensive line has been able to be held together really because of Bobby Haskins. It's also what magnifies this Elijah Page commitment, to be able to stack offensive line recruits so that in future seasons, there's going to be depth. When you go down the depth chart, you're going to have quality at all the backup positions. But anyway, back to this game, USC being able to win without Dedich playing at all and with Cortland Ford playing minimal snaps. Boy, if they can be healthy for the Washington State-Utah double stack, the ceiling for this offense rises because they're so reliable when they're good. I'm talking about Ford, talking about Dedich. So, when the starting offensive linemen are all on their game, how do you solve this offense? We saw the weakness against Oregon State. That was in part because Dedich was well below 100%. Ford did not play at all. Haskins was fighting the injury that he suffered in the Fresno State game the week before. So against Arizona State, I think the overall baseline in terms of the health of the offensive line certainly went up. I think you saw improvement in terms of guys getting fresher, working closer toward 100% health. This is exactly the right time. So hopefully that health is going to hold up and it's going to manifest itself against Washington State. If that is the case, and we'll see, but if it is true that Ford and Dedich are much closer to 100%, that's exactly what USC wanted out of the Arizona State game, to just get through it, get your elite offensive linemen healthy so that you have your very best for this really important 2-game stretch against Wazoo and Utah.
On a bit of a side note, I found it interesting in checking in with our guys, Tim, Tony, and Rick after the USC game. I was just finishing up my weekly Saturday night big call-in show. And then, of course, with the late ending and conclusion of the USC game, they weren't going on until like 2 o'clock in the morning Eastern Standard Time. where I'm located, and then I was checking in on theirs. Was they mentioned Eric Gentry in particular, just having a bit of a surreal kind of moment, because obviously he committed to Arizona State, meaning more than just as a recruitment. He was full in on the Arizona State program and Herm Edwards, and thought that's where he was going to invest 3 or 4 of his years and his playing days. So he admitted after the game, it took me a quarter or so to really be into this game, because I was high-fiving and spending a few moments with former coaches and teammates, and it wasn't a real comfortable place to be out in a stadium where I meant to spend those 3 or 4 years as a home player, and then hitting the guys that of course I had to hit them in practice from time to time, but difficult to, with the other uniform on, to really get into this game and give it a full effort. And so I thought that it was kind of curious and an interesting take from one Eric Gentry, who, again, we've discussed him quite a bit here, just being a very unique talent and an interesting player that's, of course, transitioned to USC's linebacking core.
Absolutely. And, USC with Alex Grinch, I mean, at halftime, Grinch made some clear adjustments. And boy, after living through the Clay Helton era, what was one of the central problems with the Helton era? It's that it was halftime adjustments. Third quarters were graveyards for Clay Helton's teams. So the third quarter would be when USC fell off a cliff in terms of performance, exactly the opposite in terms of improving, figuring out problems, solving what the other team was doing. And what did we see in the third quarter of this game? It was USC's best quarter. And we've seen that in a number of occasions, that USC turns it on in the third quarter, puts an opponent away, or if not necessarily putting an opponent away, certainly creates some distance, gets the working margin so that the game is manageable in the fourth quarters and backups can play. And that's how you build a program, right? That's how you build depth. So in the third quarter, you saw Eric Gentry and the rest of this defense noticeably improve, noticeably become more aggressive. And you have Mekhi Blackman. Gentry's my defensive MVP for USC through 5 weeks. Mekhi Blackman is a close second, because he's locking it down on an island on his half of the field, and that just makes life so much easier for the safeties and for everyone else on the defense. They say, hey, Mekhi has his assignment. We can just focus on our roles. We don't have to do too much. We don't have to be the hero. We just need to focus on our assignments. And Mekhi Blackman, made a big pass breakup on a 3rd and 4 in that third quarter, when USC didn't score on its first possession in the third quarter. That was the one Caleb Williams interception in the red zone. Mekhi Blackman says, I got this. And USC was able to move on from there. That's a good transition, talking about the USC defense and Eric Gentry moving to the Caleb Williams interception. Caleb Williams had a great game, but he had that first interception of the season. That's great news for USC. Not that he threw the interception, of course, but that he made a mistake in a game USC was able to win in spite of that mistake. And it's a great learning moment for Caleb, because we saw him make some very splashy touchdown throws. We saw him make throws against his body, finding a guy in the back of the end zone, creative throws that most quarterbacks don't make. And of course, most of the time, the idea of Caleb Williams trusting himself to make an above average play, you want that. You want a quarterback who says, I know I'm good. I'm going to show it. I trust my talent. You want a quarterback to play with that freedom. Obviously, the worry is he's going to trust that freedom a little too much and not rely on structure, not play the percentages in certain situations. So what's the lesson about this interception? It was 1st and goal. So on 3rd and 10, 4th and 5, yes, you got to let it ride. But on 1st and goal, that's a time where, no, you can't trust your arm talent. That's a time to think about percentages. That's a time to think about taking what the defense gives you. It's a time to think about living for another play if it's not there. It's all about situational football. And so I'm sure Lincoln Riley is going to be able to drill that into Caleb Williams' head. And so it's great for USC. I think a lot of USC fans would agree with me on this. It's good that he had a bad game against Oregon State, in the sense that, you were able to survive it, but you went through a learning process. We saw him play a lot better against Arizona State. So obviously the Oregon State game, it's an aberration, not any sort of indicator about what we're going to see on a regular basis. That's one thing the Arizona State game did. But the other thing was, oh, yeah, I can throw interceptions if I'm not careful. And on first down, I should either throw the ball away or also hand the ball off to a running back. I don't have to make the hero play on first down, maybe on third down. And so it's good before this Washington State game, in which, if Cam Ward plays great, and we'll get more into the Cougars, but like, this is my worry. If Cam Ward plays a great game, I'm not saying that he's going to, but if he does, then USC might have to get into a track meet. And if you get into a track meet, even one interception in the red zone could be very costly. So this is something for Caleb Williams to learn from. And, everything that we've seen from him under Lincoln Riley, he learns. He was a lot better. He was a lot more accurate, polished in this game after the Oregon State game. Like, he put the Oregon State game behind him, learned what he needed to learn from it, but still made a few mistakes. And so, the USC needs Caleb Williams at his best against Washington State and especially Utah. So learning from mistakes, it's a good thing, to be able to have some points of inefficiency, to have some weaknesses, have some flaws around the edges, and still win and still learn and still grow. Like, that's what you want in the early part of the season. And then you get the real finished product in the games where he has to max out. It's a good trajectory for USC.
Yeah, and I heard Caleb Williams right after the game on ESPN, when he was pulled aside, he made reference to, we weren't what we should be at Oregon State, that we as a unit, quarterback, receivers especially, not on the same page, not the timing's off. So we really pulled it together this week to say, hey, we need to be sharper, on routes, on communication, on all those things. And we'll go forward with that.